Good afternoon and welcome to Take Your Life Back Today show with me, Ralf Friedrichs. Today I'm going to do some question and answers. I went through a backlog of emails and texts that I have received, backlogging about 2 weeks now, and so I came up with a list of some questions and answers. But before that, I just want to ask everybody, do you folks know what it's like to be addicted? Have you ever been addicted? Are you addicted now, or do you know someone that is addicted? Well, folks, I want to just give you an example of what it might feel like. I'm an addiction recovery coach and the host of this show, Take Your Life Back Today show. As an addiction recovery coach, let me share this about substance abuse, and let me be crystal clear. I want to leave an everlasting impact upon you, my audience. Imagine you've been buried alive. Let's say you know that you're laying in a coffin, but you also know that you're not dead. You're just laying there. You don't know how to open your coffin and push the enormous weight of dirt that's on top of the lid of the coffin. You think of giving up and wait for death to arrive. But you also think of banging on the coffin so that maybe you will unsettle the ground above you. And then maybe, just maybe, someone will notice and start digging the way down to help and save you. This is what it's like to find yourself at the lowest point of alcohol and or drug addiction. You know you need help. You know you can't do it completely on your own, yet you don't know how to get that help. In reality, there are people who can help you standing nearby your grave, but you don't know that. You think you're going to die there. Usually, though, people don't think of death when they're habitually using drugs. In order to feed an addiction, you have to be good at repressing the fear of death. I often ask my audience, did it ever cross your mind before you used drugs and or alcohol and abused it that you might overdose? With this, I leave you with one thought. Don't be that person in the coffin banging for someone to hear you. Call me here at the Take Your Life Back Today show at 844-405-HELP, and I will help you take your life back before your life is gone. Remember, a sober today promises a better tomorrow. I hope this helped you understand what addiction is really like, because that's exactly what it's really like. It's like laying in a coffin, being buried alive, but you're not dead. It's like banging on the lid, and all the weight of that dirt is holding that lid down. And you think, and you know you're probably going to die. So you bang a little harder to unsettle the dirt, hoping that someone might notice and start digging their way down to you. Folks, help is right around the corner for anyone that's out there watching me that has addiction issues, that has alcohol issues. The only thing you need to do is to seek that help. I want to do general questions that I got on my email address. I also just want to give a quick shout out to Larry Geis from the Geis Academy at 516-485-2741. That's 516-485-2741. Larry Geis is an addiction recovery coach. He is a life coach. He will help you with today and tomorrow. Larry, like myself, not that we don't care, but it doesn't matter where you've been, folks. It doesn't matter where you've been. What does matter to Larry, as it does to me, is where you're going in your life. What direction? Are you at that fork in the road? The one direction to your left leads you and continues you on the path of addiction, or are you going to make that big change to take the right fork and start walking towards a sober life? Folks, give Larry a call at 516-485-2741. Tell Larry, guys, when you call him, that you heard about him on the Take Your Life Back Today show, and also Google him at www.odysseyconsultant.org. Another quick shout out goes to globaleyeglasses.com. They are focused on saving you money. Folks, over 240 people have called from my audience to me directly because they know that I do have 30 years optometry business, and I also do help in the optometry field. So when they call me, they want to know, what about Global Eyeglasses? What do they have for me? Well, folks, I can tell you what they have. I can tell you they have over 1,200 frames to select, men's, ladies, and children. I can tell you they have progressive lenses. I can tell you they have line bifocals. I can tell you they have photochromatics and transitions. I can tell you they have anti-reflecting coating and UV coating. I can tell you that they have thinner lenses. I can also tell you that their prices are astronomically low. What I cannot tell you is that it's going to be very expensive, because that would be a lie. Folks, globaleyeglasses.com has glasses that are about 70% less than your freestanding brick and mortar local shop in your own town. So go to www.globaleyeglasses.com. Let them focus on saving you money. First question that I received that I put on this list was, how do drug tests work? And that comes from Amy. Amy, drug tests can find out what drugs are in your body at the time of the test by looking at what's in your blood and in your urine. After the drug is metabolized, broken down by your body, so is the evidence of the use. Drug tests can detect longer-term drug use by looking at the hair samples, because these chemicals are incorporated into the hair. The usefulness of hair testing is limited by the time the person last took the drug. Thank you, Amy, for that question. This question comes from Peter. Can you become addicted to a drug if you just take it one time? Peter, if you take a drug one time and one time only, then you will not become addicted. The problem is that there is a lot we still don't know about who becomes addicted and why, and how much drug exposure it takes. We do know that each person is different, so it's like playing Russian roulette if you choose to use the drugs. Why do drugs make people do odd things? The short answer, Peter, is drugs alter your perception and your judgment. Different drugs do do things in different ways. Some drugs make you overconfident. Some drugs decrease your ability to pay attention and to things going on around you. Peter, thank you for the two questions. This one comes from John. How do you avoid drugs and still be cool at parties? John, you don't have to, first of all, be cool at parties, because sobriety is the new cool. It's an automatic cool. But to answer your question, when alcohol and drugs are readily available at parties, you may feel peer pressure to use them as a way to fit in. Here are some tips on how staying safe when you party. Find friends who don't need drugs to party. Whole different social atmosphere. Check out who will be at the party and what the plans are before you commit to something that you may turn out to be an awkward situation for you. Know the facts about the drugs. Stop to think before you make decisions that might or you might regret later. Thank you very much for that question, John. This one is from, looks like, Annadelle. What factors affect a person's likelihood of becoming addicted to drugs? Well, Annadelle, although we know what happens to the brain when someone becomes addicted, we can't predict how many times a person must use a drug before that happens. A person's unique genetic makeup and his or her environment both play a huge role. What we do know is that a person who uses drugs, including alcohol, which is also a drug, risks becoming addicted, craving the drug despite its terrible consequences. In the end, if the addiction happens, it is extremely painful and difficult to quit regardless of what drug, including alcohol, you take. But it can be done. Annadelle, thank you very much for that question. Folks, these answers I indirectly reworded, but mostly got from the Mayo Clinic. This question comes from Jeffrey. How can I protect myself from being given drugs without knowing it? Well, Jeffrey, here are some ways you can protect yourself from being given drugs without your knowledge. Don't accept beverages from other people, especially if they're open. Open your own bottles and cans. Keep your beverage with you at all times, even when you go to the bathroom. Don't drink from punch bowls or other common open containers. If someone offers you to get you a refreshment from a bar at a party, go with the person to order it. Watch it being poured and carry it yourself. Don't drink anything that tastes or smells strange. Common sense. Sometimes GHB, which is date rape drug, tastes salty. If you realize you left your beverage unattended, pour it out and get yourself a new one. And if you feel drunk, even though you haven't had any alcohol or you feel strange in any other way, get help immediately. Thank you, Jeffrey. This one comes from, let's see, Susan. How can I avoid drugs? Well, one way to avoid it is by changing maybe possibly your friends, your hangouts, but the answer to your question is you can do some key things to stay off drugs. 3 big ones are: avoid situations where they're likely to be drugs if possible, and instead of doing activities that are enjoyable and drug-free. Number 2 is hang out with people who don't use drugs, which I just stated. And number 3 is say no thanks when drugs are offered. Thank you so much for that question. This is a longer question. This is a 2-part question, and this one comes from Hannah. How can I deal with the temptation to use drugs if I'm recovering from drug problem? Hannah, I hope if you are recovering, I hope it stays and it stabilizes and you continue doing so. If you are in recovery, you know all too well that drugs cause many more problems than they solve. And keeping yourself clean and sober day to day or minute to minute is a battle and a fight. But it is a fight you can win. It is important to remember that just because you have an urge to use drugs, it doesn't mean you need to. And that urge, my friend, will pass. If you or someone you know is having a hard time staying off drugs, it is very important to get help. Remember, treatment always works. And here's the part 2 or the second question: can my body build a tolerance to drug? Go refer to question number 1 that you asked me, is how to resist the temptation. Then you don't have to worry about the tolerance. But to answer the question, many drugs lose their effectiveness if you keep taking them. A person is becoming tolerant to a drug when they have taken more, or if they take it same dose more frequently daily to get the same effect as they got at first. For example, if you take a decongestant for a cold, over several days the effective time becomes shorter and shorter. Similarly, if you take opiate medication to control pain, you may need to take more to achieve the same level of pain control. Thank you so much for that question. This one comes from Robert. What is overdosing and what should I do if I think someone is overdosing? The first thing, even before I read this, Robert, is to call 911. An overdose is when someone takes too much of a drug or medication, causing serious and harmful symptoms or even death, Robert. If someone takes too much of something on purpose to commit suicide, for example, it is called intentional or deliberate overdose. If an overdose happens by mistake, it is called accidental overdose. If it is not an emergency, but you would like information, you can call the National Poison Control Center at 1-800-222-1222. That's 1-800-222-1222 from anywhere in the United States. It is free and confidential service. You should call if you have any questions about overdose poisoning or poison prevention. You can call for any reason 24/7, but if it is an emergency, Robert, call 911 now, immediately. Thanks, Robert. This question comes from Elizabeth. How can I support a friend who's gone through drug and alcohol rehabilitation? Well, Elizabeth, that's a good question. If you are asking this question, it shows that you are a caring friend, and that it is probably the most important way you support your friend. There are lots of ways for you to support him or her also. One is to help your friend avoid situations where there is a possibility that he or she can relapse and go back to using. Go with your friend to places that are drug and alcohol free rather than to parties where there likely are drugs. And the follow-up question for you was, what are the signs of addiction? The following questions can help you know whether you're addicted to drugs. Do you take drug more often in larger amounts than you intended? Do you try unsuccessfully to quit or have constant desire for craving for the drug? Do you spend excessive time seeking the drug? Do you continue to use the drug despite knowing you're harming yourself and others? Do you experience tolerance or need to take more and more of the drug to satisfy you? And do you take the drug to relieve or to avoid withdrawal? Answer those, and if you answered to several of the above, yes, then chances are you are addicted. Thanks for those 2 questions. Last question on my list, last but not least, comes from Annabelle, and Annabelle asked me, does doing one drug like cigarettes or marijuana lead to abuse of other drugs? Well, Annabelle, whether doing one drug will lead to doing other depends on each individual person. For example, some people who use marijuana do not go on the abuse of other illicit drugs. But most people who abuse other drugs have previously used marijuana. Some people call marijuana a bridge to other drugs, a stepping stone to other drugs. Basically, being exposed to peers who use drugs, having greater access to drugs, and having problems in the first place that have led to the initial drug use could all make other drug use more likely. That was a good question. Just to recap on the questions. These were general questions asked whether you came to me on text or email, and I'm not going to go through the answers. We went through that. You can just reverse or go replay this video for that. But the first question was, how do drug tests work? You can go through urine, blood, or hair. Can you become addicted to a drug if you just take it once? That's a tough question. If you only take it once, the likelihood is probably not, but it can happen. How do you avoid drugs and still be cool at parties? Sobriety, sober is the new cool. You are the person that people will look up to. What factors affect a person's likelihood of becoming addicted to drugs? Although we know what happens to the brain when someone becomes addicted, we can't predict how many times a person must use drugs before that would happen. The follow-up question was, how can I protect myself from being given drugs without knowing it? Simple answer to that is, I can go through the whole list, but the simple answer to that is just don't drink any open containers. If you need a refill, go with the person, and always carry your drink with you no matter where you go, including the bathroom. How can I avoid drugs was the question. You can avoid situations, hang around at gatherings that are drug and alcohol free zones. How can I deal with the temptation to use drugs even if I'm recovering from drug problem? Excuse me, if you're in recovery, you all know all too well that a relapse is very likely to happen if you don't surround yourself with the right people, the right surroundings, and the atmosphere. Can my body build up a tolerance to drugs? Was the follow-up question. Many drugs lose their effectiveness. The more you take something, the more tolerance you build. So in my case, it started with 1 or 2 or 3 shots of vodka, building it up right before I hit rock bottom to 15 shots a day. What is overdosing? What should I do if somebody is overdosing? Folks, overdosing is when somebody took too much of a drug and alcohol, and whether it was intentional, like suicide overdosing, or accidentally, first thing you should do is call 911, and if it's not an emergency, here is a phone number you could utilize. Write this down. National Poison Control Center at 1-800-222-1222 from anywhere in the United States, and you can call that 24/7. We have a few more questions. How can I support a friend who's gone through drug and alcohol rehab? The first way to support them is by surrounding yourself and going to places with your friends that are drug and alcohol free. Another way is to more or less be by that person and coach that person on staying sober. What are the signs of addiction? We went through this whole list, but here is a quick one. Do you take drug more often in larger amounts than intended? Do you try to unsuccessfully quit, but you always have a desire and a craving? Do you spend excessive time seeking the drug? Do you give up other things for drugs? Do you continue to use drugs despite knowing more and more, despite knowing that you're harming yourself and others? Do you experience tolerance or need to take more and more of the drug to satisfy you? Do you experience withdrawal? If you answered yes to any of those, one or more than likely you are becoming addicted. Last one was, does doing one drug like cigarettes or marijuana lead to abuse of other drugs? I've always said that marijuana is a bridge. It's a stepping stone to a more potent drug, a more lethal drug, and to answer your question, it can, and more than likely it will. Obviously, I don't recommend using marijuana. I don't even recommend using cigarettes or drinking alcohol. However, whether doing one drug will lead to another depends on each individual person. For example, some people who use marijuana do not go on to abuse illicit drugs. On the other hand, some people use that as a bridge. Folks, these were question and answers. These are real questions from real people and real answers from reworded by me from the Mayo Clinic. And just to do this one more time, I want everybody to really understand what it's really like to be addicted to alcohol and or drugs and seeking help and not getting it. Let me share this about substance abuse, and I want to be very crystal clear because I want to leave an impact upon you. Imagine you're being buried alive. Picture yourself in a coffin being buried alive. Let's say you're in a coffin, but you also know that you're not dead. We've all seen videos and movies like that. You don't know how to open your coffin and push up the enormous weight of dirt that's above you. That's equivalent to the weight on your shoulders, the weight of the world on you when you're addicted to drugs and alcohol. You think of giving up and just wait for death to arrive. But you also think banging on the coffin, so maybe you will unsettle the ground above you, and then maybe, just maybe, someone will notice and start digging their way down to extend their arm to help you. This is what it's like to find yourself at the lowest point of alcohol and or drug addiction, and you know you need help, you know you can't do it completely on your own, yet you don't know how to get that help. In reality, there are people who can help standing nearby the grave. There are people around you right now if you have addictions that are out there to help you. But you don't know that. You think you're going to die there. Usually, though, people don't think of death when they're habitually using drugs. In order to feed an addiction, you have to be good at repressing the fear of death. I often ask my audience, and I'm going to ask you right now, did it ever cross your mind by abusing drug and alcohol, even doing drug and alcohol, you might overdose? With this, I leave you one other thought. Don't be that person in the coffin banging for someone to hear you. Call the Take Your Life Back Today show at 1-844-405-HELP, and I will help you take your life back before your life is gone. Remember, a sober today promises a better tomorrow, and if you start thinking positive things will happen. Folks, I hope these questions and answers help you. I hope my little example of what it's like to be addicted to drugs and alcohol, and the weight of that dirt being the weight on that coffin could be the weight of the world on your shoulders. And there are people standing by the grave probably mourning the person being buried alive possibly, and there are people all around you right now that are willing to help, but you need to learn to shout for help, seek help, extend your arm for help before it's too late. I hope to God, no matter where you are in my audience, you have the best day of your life. But I hope and I pray each and every time I do this video that everyone in my audience, all over this country and the world, that you all have a sober rest of your life, and may God bless you all.